everyone else, but that makes me super excited to extend an official welcome to everyone on the call and watching on Facebook Live for the West Virginians for Democracy Activists launch. I also want to extend a special thank you to West Virginia Citizens for Clean Elections, Rise Up West Virginia, Ohio Valley Environmental Coalition, and Declaration for American Democracy for helping us co-host this event tonight. And I want to also include all the folks in West Virginians for Democracy, which is this group helping West Virginia to transform our democracy, and one that represents and reflects all folks, especially West Virginians. I am Mike. I am the democracy coordinator with West Virginia Citizen Action Group. And we are going to be here talking tonight about the For the People Act. So super exciting, happy to have all of our speakers. They're gonna talk to you about what the For the People Act can transform our democracy into one that is for the people and by the people. We'll be joined by members of the West Virginians for Democracy group sort of coalition, and to discuss what this particular bill will do for West Virginians and how you all and everyone you know can talk about this and take action so that the For the People Act can pass the Senate and be signed into law. With that mouthful, I would like to pass it over to Cece with Declaration for American Democracy to talk a bit more about exactly what For the People Act is.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike, and thanks for everyone for joining us this evening. I'm happy to give a brief overview on the For the People Act. So whatever our background, color, or zip code, most of us believe that voters should pick our leaders. Our leaders do not get to pick their voters. And when it comes to elections, we want a transparent process that we can trust, where folks have equal freedom to vote, whether we live in a big city or a small town in the South or in the North. But today, a handful of extremist politicians put up barriers to silence our voices based on what we look like or where we live. So it's past time to enact national standards for voting to ensure that all of us have a say in these key decisions like pandemic relief, healthcare, and bolstering our economy. And the For the People Act will do just that. It gets big money out of politics, it makes voting simpler, safer, and fairer, and holds our public officials accountable. This once-in-a-generation bill will protect our freedom to vote by making sure that voting options are equally accessible across all 50 states through enacting and expanding policies like automatic voter registration, early voting, and vote by mail. It also would make sure that our voices are heard by preventing billionaires from buying our elections, increasing the power of small donors through enacting a small donor matching system and shining a light on dark money. And finally, the For the People Act would ensure that we can elect leaders who govern in our interests by ending partisan gerrymandering through having congressional districts drawn by independent commissions. We are also here in support of the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which would restore the Voting Rights Act and our government's ability to prevent voter suppression. And we're also here tonight in support of DC statehood, which would finally give a vote and voice to Congress to more than 700,000 teachers, construction workers, healthcare workers, and everyday folks who currently pay federal taxes but don't have any vote or voice in Congress just because they live in Washington, DC. So with all of that, I am so happy to pass it back to Mike so that we can hear from our excellent speakers.
Thank you, Cece. I think that was a great summary. I would now like to introduce a group of panelists from the West Virginia for Democracy group that has been doing some of this work. This evening, we are joined by movement leaders from voting rights, youth, and environmental advocacy communities. It's my pleasure to introduce our first panelist, former West Virginia Secretary of State, Natalie Tennant. Natalie, if you could start by introducing yourself, but also sharing with us why the For the People Act is important to you.
We all forget, don't we? Thank you so much, Mike and Cece, for having this. This is a wonderful opportunity for all of us to come together. You can tell just across West Virginia and across the country how excited people are, because I continue to read about poll after poll, how Americans love what is in For the People Act. And as Mike said, I'm a former two-term Secretary of State in West Virginia. I've also worked for the Brennan Center for Justice as the manager of state advocacy and a voting rights specialist too. And so when I talk about this evening being such a special evening and the work that we do over the next several weeks is so important, I don't exaggerate when I say that this is important and monumental discussions that we're having, because it will have major impacts on the direction of our country and truly can strengthen our democracy. And so when you ask what's important to me and For the People Act, I know it's like, it's not fair to say, or it's not, maybe not so much appropriate, but everything. But, you know, because when you look at it, it's bold advancements. It's an opportunity to have what Americans and West Virginians want. And they have asked for national standards where there is an opportunity to have equal accessibility across the country, where it will protect our freedoms to vote. So that's one reason that For the People Act is so important to me. And we see that in all of the different areas that we're going to talk about today, when it comes to voter registration, when it comes to access to the ballots, when it comes to you know, making it fair and getting big money out of politics. So a voter in West Virginia or a small donor in West Virginia has that same ability and impact that we might see with these billionaires and millionaires. They don't deserve a larger voice because they have a bigger bank account. West Virginians deserve to have the voice. Here's another thing that why the For the People Act is so important to me, because as a former Secretary of State who focused on bringing election advancements to West Virginia, like online voter registration. During my term, we passed automatic voter registration in West Virginia. It just hasn't been implemented yet. I also brought the ERIC system, the Electronic Registration Information Center. So when you look at registration in West Virginia, you can look and see, you know, I'm proud to say I've brought more voting reforms like that than any other Secretary of State. And that's why For the People Act is so important, because I see the benefits that can come from it. And I also see what happens when maybe an elected official, or as you and Cece were saying, Mike, what happens when someone drags their feet, when they try to put barriers up and throw barriers up. So that's why this For the People Act is so important. It's why it's so important everyone coming together to show that this is the next big civil rights bill that we are having. So I'm excited about tonight, and I'm really excited about the work that I've done over the last couple of months, that I've done over my career as a chief election official, and that we're all going to do together going forward.
Thank you so much for that answer. And talking about West Virginia voters and voting rights, can you speak to the attacks on voting rights at the state level?
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine? I mean, who thought in West Virginia, especially when we heard how successful the 2020 election is, how secure it was, what a great voter turnout, and why wouldn't you continue on what we built in 2020? Yeah, it might have been under a pandemic, and the clerks did Herculean jobs. At the same time, why not just keep up with it? Why not continue have no excuse voting? And so that's why it was so disheartening to me. I'll talk about West Virginia in particular, but we've all heard the numbers, like 43 states. I think the Brennan Center reported this, 43 states, more than 200, maybe nearly 300 restrictive voting bills were introduced. If across the country, we're going to say we had the best election in 100 years, and then you're going to start restricting, that's a problem. So I was particularly concerned in West Virginia when they wanted to take away and shift the most popular early voting days. And it was the county clerks there, it was the Secretary of State, and it was some lawmakers. That's a terrible thing. When West Virginians are accustomed to how they're going to be voting, early voting that last Saturday before the election, but you say, oh, no, we're going to move it forward. Sorry, you're going to miss that. They wanted to gut automatic voter registration that, as I said, has been on the books since 2016. That's a terrible thing. Starting the purging process like 2 years before. So for people who only vote in presidential elections, during that odd year, they can start looking at you and targeting you and put you on an inactive list. And so that moves things early on to purging, and that's not a good thing. Removing assistance that local election officials might get through grants, like putting up barriers to that. So those were some of the concerns that I saw. And it was just so disheartening. And thankfully, people like who are on this call, people who are activists, who called, who showed up at the public hearing and said, this is not right. I mean, there were more people, it was 3-1 people against that bill because they knew it was wrong, to the only elected officials and out-of-state folks who were trying to drown out West Virginia voices. So we came together, and that's why, getting fired up tonight and being part of this, and know that you can make a difference, not just coming on a webcast and a webinar and be like, oh, that sounds really good. I like to hear Natalie talk. I like hear what these guys want. No, man, we're gonna work it all together. We're gonna continue that work that we did when we showed that at that public hearing.
Thank you for that answer as well, specifically in talking about making West Virginians feel like they're making a difference. Can you maybe say a few more words about how this bill would help West Virginians participate in democracy, especially for the folks listening and watching, and what they need to hear about this bill?
I mean, and this is, we talk a lot about Senator Manchin, and we want him to sponsor this bill, and we want him to support it. Well, we want Senator Capito to do it too, because this does have it has a direct impact on Americans. But when we talk about West Virginia, and I know Senator Manchin is worried about what this might do for rural West Virginians and rural voters. Well, this addresses it. I mean, here's the way I imagine it. I'm from a farm. I go back there every week and stay with my dad and help him out. And so I know what it's like to get maybe one trip a week to town, maybe not even one trip a week, that you don't always make these frequent trips into a bigger town like Fairmont or Morgantown or Charleston. So when you do, you have to do all of your errands at once. And say somebody needs to go to the DMV. You're so nervous about going to the DMV that do I have all my correct paperwork, that you might forget to say, oh yeah, can you sign me up to register to vote? An example is automatic voter registration just prompts you. It doesn't automatically register you, because you still have to go through the process of saying if you're eligible and attesting to everything, and the clerks still have to have the authority to make you a registered voter by sending your card. But my point to that is that you get to have that efficiency of government by making maybe your only trip. Not every county in West Virginia even has a DMV branch. So that's one like particular example that I can give. The other example is no excuse absentee voting. I mean, we do live in rural areas, and sometimes it is easier just to receive the mail, vote, and send it back. That's a way that it can help, and West Virginians can certainly benefit and participate in democracy. And all the way around, the voter registration aspect, the opportunity to get to vote, early voting, how important is that? You may be making that one trip where you're going to go past a courthouse or an early voting site, and that might have been your only opportunity to get a ride or get in there and do that with people who work so much shift work. So those are some of the concerns I have that I know that West Virginians can benefit from. And certainly we see it here. We see the dark money and the millions of dollars that are poured into West Virginia. A perfect example. I want to give specifics to people of why this bill is so important and will help. If you remember, in 2016, the legislature changed our judicial elections to make them nonpartisan, thinking, oh, well, that won't be, people won't be spending as much money. Well, they spent $3 million on one particular race. And so that's why this bill is important too, because it addresses that, it holds accountable, it closes any loopholes, it goes after online commercials that or online ads that have to be held accountable. So those are specific ways that this helps West Virginians specifically.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed that, and I know people love watching you speak. So we really appreciate you coming tonight to talk to everyone about the For the People Act, why it's important to you, why it's important to West Virginians. After that, I would like to kick things over to our next panelist, to Kaya Smith, who is a youth and racial justice organizer with Young West Virginia. To Kaya, same thing, please introduce yourself. We're happy to have you here and talk about why the For the People Act is important to you.
Hi, thank you so much. Thanks, Mike, and thank you for all of the beautiful words that have been said so far. So yeah, my name is Takaya Smith. I am a youth and racial justice organizer right here in West Virginia. The For the People Act allows us to honor the freedom work that was laid before us and helps us move towards progression in almost every aspect of our lives. Our ability to change and engage in a fair democracy is crucial to the social movements championed and carried on the backs of our young people. I was the lead organizer on the Young WV Vote Together project in the 2020 election. We worked with student organizers across the state to support their crucial role in our electoral process. We have engaged students who have never voted before or who have been generationally excluded from fair access to voting, transient students, and young people from all walks of life to strengthen our democracy.
Speaking of young people, bringing them into the conversation and talking about how crucial that vote and that voice can be to the movement space, what are the top issues for young people, and where does that fall into the For the People Act, and how does that fit into their priorities?
Yes, of course, racial justice and economic justice are just a couple of the things that are on the front of young people's minds. And we know that we rely on fair access to democracy to be able to change and have mobility in those areas. But I think there's really not any movement that can move forward without fair access to democracy. So I think young people have a clear understanding and a growing understanding of how crucial the For the People Act is, and that it's a support for every movement, no matter what your priorities are. And I think that's why it's able to appeal to people all across the political spectrum, because it's just a necessary, part of our nation's identity, not only who we have been, but who we want to be.
Can you tell us the role that young people are playing in the movement to get this bill passed?
Yes, so as we witness interest and energy grow from young people to be civically engaged, we are also encountering, and we did encounter barriers. And so some of those things included like restrictive deadlines and a lot of misinformation, and just different barriers that really young people were very kind of inexperienced with. I mean, we had so many young people who were purged off of the voter rolls. So those are just some of the examples. And young people are understanding they have to make sure they're registered to vote, and also be able to educate their communities on why this legislation is so important and connected to access to, a better quality of life. And so, we're doing that community education through canvassing and relational organizing. We're having young people contact our senators here and just really, keep that campaigning and that word of mouth and all of that education around pro-democracy legislation going.
Thank you so much, Takaya, for speaking with us tonight, especially bringing attention to how crucial it can be for youth to not only be involved in this, but what access and education looks like. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I would now like to turn it over to our next panelist, Morgan Sell, president of the Eastern Panhandle Green Coalition and organizer with West Virginia Working Families Party. Morgan, please introduce yourself and let us know why the For the People Act is important to you.
Thanks so much, Mike. My name is Morgan Wisniewski-Sell, and as you said, I'm the president of the local environmental group. You can shorten it to EPGC or find us online at EPGreenWV, as well as I'm an organizer with the West Virginia Working Families Party. So for the People Act is important to me because I believe very strongly in people power. And I think for far too long, our political arena has been controlled by big donors and corporate greed. And I, for one, am ready to start shifting that narrative up and away from our home state.
Thank you. Next, what issues, I apologize. Eastern Panhandle Green Coalition, that could be a mouthful. What did you say? EPGC, that works too. Very known for being on the front lines to fight and combat climate change in the state. So why is the For the People Act a major priority for you and your members?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, Mike. In the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia, we've experienced major malfunctions within the transparency of our local and state governments. Unfortunately, much to our dismay, over the last few years, an appointed body of people known as the Jefferson County Development Authority have made irreversible decisions around the growth and economic direction for our land without the consent of the community. So here where I live and in many other places, county commissioners hold 6-year terms, longer than our US president, and they also hold a lot of power, one of which of these powers include appointing people to this kind of rogue development authority board. This type of power that is ungoverned and not elected by the people is one way in which money starts to talk and overpower the voice of the people. So as a leader within the environmental justice movement here in West Virginia, we know if we want clean air and clean water for all, then we must also have clean and transparent government. And so it is imperative that we reduce the influence of these large corporate donors in our county, state, and national races, and at the very least, provide a pathway of full disclosure and transparency of these donations. Like my friend Aaron Lehman said to me, our quality of life is dependent on the decisions that our representatives make on our behalf. So I believe HR1S1 would help make it easier, not harder, for people to come to the polls, to know their voting rights, and to feel safe while they are voting. And while we're talking about safety, we need to talk about why fear is in such close relation to the experience of voting. And we need to dig deeper as a nation into why voter suppression happens every single election in places where our marginalized communities live and vote. In order to bring democracy to and for all of us, we need to pass bold anti-racist policy. I think that would positively affect the voting processes and procedures for our marginalized communities. Just like Takaya said, we know that racial justice is economic justice, is environmental justice. So thankfully, we already have leaders that are working to shift this narrative from the ground up, to move people from fear back to love right there at the polling locations, like Nalini Stamp, who is the Strategic Partnerships Director, also a mouthful, with the Working Families Party. And she's a part of revolutionary work of bringing joy to the polls with dance and music, so the people waiting in lines exercising their right to vote can feel at peace and not in fear for their basic human right. So the For the People Act is important to our members because we believe, like Margaret Mead says, to never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has.
Thank you. I love the quote at the end, a small group of thoughtful citizens can indeed change a lot of things. Speaking of big things, to help us talk about how we can be empowered, fossil fuel giants have massive influence over our political system because they flooded money into campaigns and they engage in massive lobby efforts. How much would For the People Act shift the power and dynamics in Washington so that we can pass bold climate change policy we need to save ourselves and our planet?
Right. Well, definitely, we know this all too well here in West Virginia. We have historically been bought and sold by fossil fuel industries over the decades and continue to be used as pawns to perpetuate this retiring coal industry. And currently here in my hometown, being held hostage by these relationships between fossil fuel industries and Danish corporate polluter Rockwool. So not only are these multinational billion-dollar corporations in relationship with these fossil fuel giants, but here locally, these corporations have quite literally lined the pockets of our elected officials. One of these officials being the House Majority Whip, Delegate Paul Espinosa, who represents House District 66 here in my county, and also sits pretty on the payroll of Rockwool as public affairs manager. I think this is the perfect example of how an elected official is more concerned with these toxic corporate greed relationships than they are with the community that they represent. So in order to pass bold climate policy on a federal level, we need to elect leaders that are willing to stand up for the 99% and not accept dark money donations. Thank you.
Absolutely. And one last question. Can you speak to us on how this would impact the lives of everyday West Virginians?
Sure. Well, I just got done phone banking for the last 2 weeks in West Virginia, and I'm reminded that we are behind by decades in many areas of our state within education, infrastructure, care, and energy. And why, like Natalie said, in 2021 with bills like SB 565, are we trying to take away some of the early voting days and make it harder for people to get to the polls, some of these people being our essential workers? Why are we working to pass legislation that would be disenfranchising voters and not instead working to pass pay raise legislation for our county clerks so that they can make a better wage, hire more staff, and in turn be more equipped and ready for this increase of voters during the allotted time for early voting? So this would make it easier for our county clerk staff and easier for people to vote. So I believe For the People Act would help the lives of everyday West Virginians by calling out voter suppression bills like SB 565. And it would also obviously give that pathway for clear disclosure regarding campaign finances, which has been, like we know, an underlying issue in West Virginia for many, many years. So I believe we need to elect leaders that are going to include everyone in the conversation. That's why I'm an organizer, and that's why I feel passionate about continuing to uplift transformational leaders across the state. And I believe with the passing of the For the People Act, we can get folks in office whose voices represent the people and not the pockets of corporate polluters. And I believe this is the pathway to decrease the suffering of humanity and provide actual justice for all. And just like Cece said, we need voters to be able to get to pick our leaders, not leaders. Leaders do not get to pick the voters. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And like Natalie said, let's keep our voices being heard. We have no choice but to use our voice.
Thank you so much, Morgan, for talking to us tonight about why this is important. We just heard from 3 phenomenal speakers about how the For the People Act will transform our democracy into one that is far more representative and reflective of West Virginians. We only touched the surface with voting rights, youth, and environmental advocacy. There are way more issues and ways that this relates to West Virginian voters. I am going to now pass it back over to Cece, who will give a brief state of play on where the bill is in the legislative process.
Yeah, I just have to say, I am so fired up right now. The For the People Act will do such incredible things. And so I'm here to update y'all on where it's at, how we can get this passed. So the For the People Act did pass the United States House in March of this year, which is so exciting. It's passed the House, so all eyes are now on the Senate. For the People Act was introduced as S1, designated the first bill, signaling it a top priority for the session, which is really, really exciting. The first Senate hearing happened in March, and we're looking toward the markup of the bill this month on May 11th. And because redistricting is rapidly approaching, it's critical that we see the For the People Act come to a vote and pass this summer. So we are finally at this moment after decades of voting rights advocates and activists who have been fighting this fight. So with this new leadership in our country, we have this important and critical opportunity to transform our political system into one that realizes the true promise of democracy, a government of the people, by the people, for the people. So now is our time. Us here right on this call, everyone watching at home on Facebook Live, it's our time to continue that work and to take action in order to pass the For the People Act and get it signed into law. So that's where the bill's at. It's go time. It's summer. We are going to pass the For the People Act. So I am going to now share with you all different ways to get involved on what you can do to help get this done. So bear with me here. I'm going to share my screen so y'all can see what we are working with here. Awesome. Great. Can everyone see that? I think it's still loading. Perfect. Here it is. All right. So we have 3 great opportunities here. One is this Saturday, May 8th. It is a nationwide John Lewis Day of Action. So there are over 100 events scheduled across the country that are votercades in support of the For the People Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and DC statehood. And there are 4 happening in West Virginia. So if you are near or in Beckley, Charleston, Huntington, or Morgantown, and are feeling fired up like all of us here on this call, we'd love to see you there. Participate in a socially distant and COVID safe way from your car to show your support and show the elected officials of West Virginia that this is a priority for us. So there's a link here to learn more. We'll be dropping links in the chat and posting them on Facebook so y'all can get plugged in. So that's the soonest action that you can take is May 8th, this Saturday. Thursday of next week, the 13th, there's another event that we are going to be having with West Virginians for Democracy and amazing state partners, and it's going to be a storytelling training on the For the People Act. So you heard from our amazing 3 speakers about why the For the People Act is important to them. And that's extremely compelling and extremely moving. This bill is huge and massive and is going to do so many important things. But what will stick in my mind is what Morgan said, right? Like this will affect the environment. This will affect folks' well-being. This will affect people feeling safe at the polls. Those are stories that will stick with folks. So if you want to learn to do that so you can share this with family and friends in your community, we would love to see you virtually on Zoom next Thursday. And then lastly, we have phone banking opportunities that will connect you to folks in your state of West Virginia. And we'll connect you there and you can say, are you willing to make phone calls to Senator Capito and Manchin right now and ask them to support the For the People Act? So we have opportunities Saturdays with Common Cause and Tuesdays with Represent Us, great partners. So we right now, we are going to do a poll here. And I want to know exactly how y'all are going to take action. So give me a second here. I will get this poll up here. Awesome. Can I get a thumbs up from folks? Can you see that? Awesome. Cool. So we'll wait a second, let folks take the poll. And that's the May 8th votercades, the democracy storytelling training, or phone banking. And more to come. These are just the ones that are coming up right around the corner, but we're in it for the long haul. Awesome. Awesome, awesome. Well, it looks like I'm gonna end the poll here, and we'll be following up with y'all to make sure you get all the information that you need. Yeah, let me share the results here. So we have 33% of y'all are going to attend a votercade, and we have about 50% of folks are going to attend the You, Me, and Democracy storytelling training, and then phone banking, another roughly 50% of folks. So that is awesome. Y'all are the change makers, and you are really what's gonna move the needle on this. So happy to be in this community with y'all. But now that we know what we're gonna do next, and we're feeling fired up, we are going to pass it back to Jesse and Emily for one more tune to close us out.
United we stand, divided we fall. For every dime they give us, a battle must be fought. So working people, use your power, the key to liberty. Don't support that rich man style of luxury. There ain't no way they can ever keep us down, oh no. There ain't no way they can ever keep us down. We won't be bought, we won't be sold, to be treated right, well that's our goal. And there ain't no way they can ever keep us down. We've been shot, we've been jailed, Lord, it's a sin. Women and little children stood right by the men. But we got a union contract that keeps the worker free, and they'll never shoot that union out of me. No, they'll never shoot that union out of me. Oh no, they'll never shoot that union out of me. We've got a contract in our hands signed by the blood of honest men, and they'll never shoot that union out of me. Oh, that power wheel is rolling, rolling right along, and the government just keeps it going, going strong. So working people, get your help from our own kind. Your welfare ain't on that rich man's mind. No, your welfare ain't on that rich man's mind. Oh no, your welfare ain't on that rich man's mind. Can't feel, but we'll stop that big wheel, and they'll never, never, never keep us down. No, they'll never, never, never keep us down. Oh no, never, never, never keep us down. They cheat, lie, frame and steal, but we'll stop that big wheel, and they'll never, never, never keep us down. No, they'll never, never, never keep us down.
Thank you all again. That was great. These songs, I mean, I know people are really feeling these songs and feeling the words. So I want to thank everyone again for your work and joining West Virginians for Democracy, and all the other groups that helped us post tonight, for coming out tonight as well. Another huge thanks to our incredible speakers and panelists, and to Jesse and Emily for the two amazing performances and for joining us this evening. Want everyone to have a great night. Let's, find ways to get involved, stay connected, and get For the People Act signed and into law. But I want to, again, thank you all so much for coming.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.